On April 26, 2022, the CAR, the Central African Republic, passed a law to give Bitcoin legal status. In reality, the situation is not very clear. The bill I saw talked about cryptocurrencies as a whole, while the president's official statement directs the bill to Satoshi Nakamoto's invention. In short, all this is still very fresh, and despite this ambiguity, we can only welcome this decision from Central Africa. That's why we formed an international Bitcoiner group on the initiative of Sébastien Gouspillou to offer to meet with Central African government to share our skills with the local government. And there you have it. On May 10th, we received an invitation to meet with government officials. Of course, I'm going with them to cover this trip as the media that will report on what we do there, because one of the essential elements in this kind of approach is integrity and transparency. We would also like to thank the other members of the group, Samson Mao, Alex Gladstein, for the most known, but also Alexis Roussel, Fode Diop, Gloria Kambala, Gile Kadinian, and many others who could not free themselves this time as things went so fast. We would also like to thank Ledger for its involvement because we had many exchanges with their teams about this delegation, and we thank them for their support. So, here we are a few vaccines later, and we are ready to leave. But let's get back to this initiative of President Touadéra. Is it really a good idea? What are the obstacles and problems that can be encountered when making Bitcoin its legal tender? Is such a monetary policy suitable for the situation of Central Africa, which is currently living with the CFA franc? Let's have a look at it all together. Here we go. First of all, I would like to point out that the president of Central Africa, Faustin Archange Touadéra, is a mathematician, which gives him a deep understanding of the functioning of Bitcoin. I'll let you judge the depth of this type of tweet. Understanding the math underpinning the Nakamoto consensus is fundamental in acknowledging the power of Bitcoin as universal money, for the hashtag math connoisseur. Finally, the referral tweet makes a scientific paper that I will refrain from reading to you. By the way, the author of this article, Ricardo Perez Marco, is also part of the delegation, even if he can't come this time. All this to say that we are dealing with a president who sees Bitcoin for what it is technically, in addition to seeing what it is politically. It's pretty amazing. So let's talk about it. What exactly is Bitcoin good for in a country like Central Africa? The question is by no means trivial because Central Africa is the second poorest country in the world in terms of Human Development Index after Somalia. To give you an idea, the population of the Central African Republic is about 10 times poorer than the population of El Salvador. And having been there, I can assure you that the situation in El Salvador is not the most enviable, at least for the moment. You should know that only 15% of the 5 million Central Africans have access to the internet. If I understand correctly, only certain cities, including the capital Bangui, really have internet access. In terms of personal security, the situation in Central Africa is not the easiest either. The country is coming out of a civil war that ended in 2014. I don't know exactly what these tensions are, but what I do know is that a trip to the Central African requires at least some preparation and good local contacts. Finally, to understand the situation in the country, you should know that the total power for electricity production is about 40 megawatts, according to our sources. Let's face it, 40 megawatts for 5 million people means that very few people have access to light. To give you an idea, the per capita consumption in Central Africa is 27 kilowatts per hour, while in countries like France or Switzerland, we are rather on 7,500 kilowatt hours per capita, which is about 300 times more. Remember that energy consumption is a direct function of economic growth. So what good can Bitcoin do in this situation? Let's deal with two different aspects. The first, the economic aspect, and the second, the democratic aspect. I put democracy second because I always keep in mind that democracy is primarily a rich man's sport, if I may say so. Moreover, if as a Swiss resident, my heart is in direct democracy, I am well aware that the vast majority of the world does not live in a democracy and that there are other political systems to organize life and society. So let's take the economic aspects. As everyone knows, Bitcoin needs even a basic internet network and a minimum of electricity to function. In practical terms, only 15% of the population has the ability to access Bitcoin, which is a small million people. That's still a base. Moreover, these people would need Bitcoin because only 50,000 people have a bank account. As it is, we could already be of service to about 700,000 people, which is already quite a lot. But that's not all. If the country only has 40 megawatts of electricity, the mining industry could enable it to develop its energy production infrastructure rapidly, because according to our sources, there's a hydroelectric potential of 2,000 megawatts in the Central African Republic. Mining could help finance the investments. Potentially, the country could multiply its production by 50 without producing any greenhouse gases. So there is a model to develop. Sébastien Gouspillou, who is already the official advisor to several countries around the world, has already begun discussions with the local authorities in Central Africa to develop mining on their soil and thus make the most of this untapped energy to develop local infrastructures. As we explained in our previous video, Bitcoin mining can unlock development projects and be an economic crutch for producers. Moreover, let's not forget that for better or worse, this kind of initiative is an incredible spotlight on the country. Who could locate El Salvador precisely on a map 2 years ago? Who knew Nayib Bukele until a few months ago? For all these countries with very little to lose and working hard for several decades on their economic development, this technological revolution is a godsend. It is a marketing campaign showing the world that the country is trying to get by. As far as President Touadéra is concerned, I admit that I'm very interested in his scientific profile. But back to the main question, what is the point of having Bitcoin as a legal tender in your country? The first obvious benefit for a country like Central Africa is bankability. Making Bitcoin a legal tender allows all inhabitants to exchange Bitcoins without fiscal friction. Bitcoin as a protocol will take care of the technical frictions of account opening and usage. Basically, having a way to store value, like a bank account or a Bitcoin address, allows you to project yourself into the future. I don't know about Central Africa, but I've seen El Salvador. To put it simply, let's take the example of the watermelon vendor. In El Salvador, many people have watermelon stands on the side of the road to make a living. Well, if you're a watermelon vendor in El Salvador, what do you do with your money at the end of the day? You have coins and bills, and keeping that money in cash is clearly risky. So the reflex is to spend it regularly because hoarding puts you at risk. Bitcoin allows you to store your money without showing, and without it being easily stolen. This is just an incredible step because as a watermelon seller, you just got access to savings. The problem is that the Bitcoin price is very volatile. Everyone will have noticed that. So saving in Bitcoin is great for the wealthy who can afford to build up long-term savings. But it's a real danger for a small trader who keeps a weekly cash flow. Put trivially, if Bitcoin loses 20% overnight, as it often does, and you go shopping the next day, well, you eat 20% less that week. This is still a major problem. That's why El Salvador created the Chivo wallet. And even though it has its flaws, its main advantage is to offer a simple bridge between Bitcoin and the dollar. You can technically criticize Chivo all you want, but you have to understand that this functionality between Bitcoin and a stable coin dollar is a vital necessity. So if you're a maxi who swears by Bitcoin, know that the watermelon sellers in El Salvador don't have the same problems you do. And that's where I have to tell you about the Galoy company, represented by Nicholas Berti and Noor El Bawab, who will be part of this trip. Their job is, among other things, to develop wallets, i.e. software, to have access to one's Bitcoins. I remind you that Bitcoins are accessible with a simple private key and are visible thanks to a public address, but that to access them easily, there are small software programs called wallets, which are used to interact with the blockchain. The group that will be going to Central Africa is working on this, and yes, we would like Galoy to bring its skills in development of a Bitcoin wallet that also allows to have stablecoin in CFA franc and in dollar. I don't like the dollar or the CFA, but it's just the reality of people living there. So that's the first achievement of Bitcoin, the banking of the population and access to savings, and therefore to invest in their future. But that's not all. We also need to talk about the interest for a government to have a legal tender that it does not control, since this is an element that intrigues many people. To do this, we must ask ourselves, what is the purpose of a currency? The question is not really simple. One could answer that a currency allows to store value. From this point of view, it is clear that so-called fiat currencies, i.e. those managed by governments, do not fulfill this role, since inflation eats away at the value of currencies. Moreover, the history of paper currencies has always ended in the same way. That is to say, their disappearance once they have been used as political means to solve problems that are not monetary but economic. The euro and the dollar are going the same way with Keynesian policies and other so-called modern monetary theories. The euthanasia of the rentier of Keynes is a reality, only a euthanasia of people's savings, and therefore a euthanasia of their future. From this point of view, Bitcoin is a strength but also a weakness. It is incredible strength because the single phrase, "there will only be 21 million," is a cure for money supply inflation. Bitcoin's strength is its design and decentralized governance, which guarantees that there will only be 21 million. On the other hand, Bitcoin's great weakness, if I may say so, is that the technology is still being adopted. It is not a stable currency because it is in a growth phase. On the one hand, it's great when you buy Bitcoin and see its price increase by more than 100% per year on average. On the other hand, you have to be aware that if the price of Bitcoin is rising, it means that the risk of it failing and going back to zero has not yet been eliminated. This may be hard to hear for some maxes, but if there were no more risk, as its most fervent supporters think, then the market would have already arbitrated its price and volatility would be almost zero. But that is not the case at all. Bitcoin today is still a gamble that is not necessarily won. You have to accept it. So when you say to someone, adopt Bitcoin because it will give you the access to savings, that's okay. On the other hand, telling people buy Bitcoin because its price is going to go up is encouraging them to take a speculative risk on the future. Personally, I'm fine with that because in the Central African Republic, the population has very little, so they have an interest in taking a lot of risk with it. Let me explain. If tomorrow I lose everything I have and I have 1,000 euro left, I will keep 500 of it to live on and start a business, and I will invest the other 500 in Bitcoins. Why? Because if Bitcoins continues to grow, I double my 500 euros regularly, and that will make a big difference. On the other hand, if Bitcoin fails, then I will have lost only 500 euros, which I can earn quickly by working. That's why Bitcoin is particularly suited to poor countries. The risk involved in its adoption is rewarded with significant gains. It is a fundamentally asymmetric bet. Bitcoin is a currency that grows from the bottom up. To believe that countries like El Salvador or Central Africa will get by without taking risks is a lie. Furthermore, these populations understand entrepreneurship and risk-taking very well because no one is coming to assist them. They have a natural awareness of what it means to do business. Go set up a watermelon stand on the side of the road, and then we'll talk. Personally, I started out as a microphone salesman in the supermarkets and organized newspaper distribution with street vendors. I can tell you that it is a formative business school. So yes, Bitcoin is a really good idea, and that's why its biggest adoption rates are in the poorest countries like Vietnam, India, or Pakistan. Moreover, we must be aware that in all these countries, people are traumatized by monetary problems. In France and Switzerland, we don't know or no longer know what it is like to lose all your savings in a few weeks or months due to hyperinflation. In Africa or South America, it is common. As a result, any NTH reform of the local currency is often greeted with a lot of skepticism because people know or at least strongly suspect that the same problems of corruption and manipulation will reappear sooner or later. Bitcoin is a game changer. It is finally an independent currency, dissociated from any political decision, and clearly, this gives hope and helps rebuild that trust between citizens and their governments. Finally, I saw on Twitter accusations of collusion with non-democratic regimes against those who went to El Salvador. Basically, we were accused of supporting authoritarian regimes that do not respect essential human rights, etc. What can we say to this? In my opinion, one must be extremely careful when judging a government in El Salvador or in the Central African Republic, because their reality is completely different from ours. I'm not saying that we should not be critical, but we must keep in mind that these countries are not in the same paradigm as we are. You don't run a trendy school in the 5th arrondissement of Paris like a reformatory for teenagers in Central America. It won't work. Some people in our Western democracies tend to forget how easy it is to live in. I think we should always come back to the facts and remain pragmatic. Bitcoin is particularly suited to the poorest populations because they are by nature excluded from our modern systems, such as the banking system in this case. From there, you either agree to go and dialogue with the governments of these countries to move things forward, or you prefer to stay above the fray by taking a moral and philosophical view on the nature of human rights to reflect on right and wrong. For my part, I think humanity needs entrepreneurs more than philosophers at a time when there is so much new knowledge to be disseminated and transformed into concrete action in the world. So yes, making decisions is compromising, but the people who win rugby games are the players in the scrum, not the referees. You can't do business with a large number of countries in the world without crossing the red line. On the other hand, not to do so if you can, is to abandon a part of humanity to save yourself from the harshness of reality. Everyone chooses their side, And that's why this Bitcoiner delegation going to the Central African Republic has to be as transparent and honest as possible. We're not going there to sell laundry, but to listen. Personally, my way of life is light years away from the people of Central Africa, and I can't wait to learn more about the reality and bring it to you. As for the other members of the delegation, they have strong skills, but they too wish to travel to see, listen, and understand. Only then will they be able to exchange with the Central African government to give them the fruits of their reflections. I am also confident in this trip because I know several of them well, such as Sébastien Gouspillou, Gloria Kambale, and Alexis Roussel, and I know that they are honest people. So there you have it. I don't know if any of this will do any good, but that's life. All I know is that I'll have great regrets if I tell myself that I could have tried and that I didn't try. Finally, if you want another point of view, Lionel Generat, who will be part of this delegation, wrote an article on bitcoin.fr about Central Africa that I took as a basis for this video. In any case, we'll tell you more on Grand Angle Crypto as soon as we can, because between us, we may still be living and being a player in the revolution of the international monetary system. You have to admit that we are lucky to live in a time where we are not bored. On this note, see you soon for new videos. Ciao.